we saw that human beings are all created in the image of God, right? We're all created to be in a special relationship with God where we imitate Him, right? Like a son imitates the father. And we reflect God's character as we rule this world that He has put in our place. But the truth is, we don't want to live like God. We don't want to live for His purpose. We don't want to be like Him. We would much rather be our own man. We would much rather be our own woman, right? Why should this so-called deity tell us what to do? We want to be free to define who we are according to ourselves. We don't want to have someone, determine and rule our lives by some holy book, right? We don't want anyone to tell us how to live. And even as Christians, we think that way, right? We begrudgingly read the Bible and we begrudgingly obey its rules. And basically, we don't want to obey what God has tell us to do, right? Because we would much rather live life ourselves. And you see, when we choose to be something other than what God has made us to be, when we want to be something else, that is an outright rejection and rebellion against God Himself, because God has made you to be like Him. He has already told you and He has already called you to be like Him. And now you are saying that there are better things that you would rather be than to be like God Himself. That's someone saying to you, imagine someone saying to you, I'd rather be something else other than to be like you. When God Himself is perfectly holy and righteous, right? And so to reject God, to not want God and to not desire to be like Him, that is sin, that is autonomy, that is rebellion, that is being a micronation joker whilst living in God's huge world. And God is definitely not, going to be neutral about it. I mean, God is actually extremely angry about our rebellion, and He has to be. He has to be, because he is God Himself. He's holy and righteous and just. God cannot look at our rebellion. God cannot look at our sin and treat it as if it's nothing. If God does that, then He's not God anymore, right? God is not some cold, cruel deity who feels, indifferent about human beings and the world He created. God is not some passionless God who, just sees human beings killing each other, living in their sin. Uh, I mean, you think about it, right? If every human being calls themselves a micronation, what's going to happen? Literally, it's going to be war, right? It's everyone going to be killing each other. And that's already what's happening now, right? All human beings, when we claim to be gods ourselves, when we don't submit to the real God, then naturally this world is going to be the way it is. And so when God looks at this world, He's not going to be indifferent, He's not going to say, oh, yeah, just let them kill themselves, right? He's not like that. That's not our God. God is passionate. He cares deeply about the human beings He has created. He cares deeply about the world He has created. He cares deeply that the world is not ruled righteously the way it's meant to be. He cares deeply about our sin, and because He cares deeply, He hates it. He hates it, and He is angry towards sinners because He loves the goodness of His world. You see, if love and hate are not necessarily opposite. If you love women, right? If you love women's rights and all that, then you will hate things that degrade women. You will hate human trafficking. You will hate prostitution. Because God loves the good and righteous world. Because God loves the kind of world He made the world to be, like in Revelation 21, where there's no death, sorrow, and pain. That's why He hates sin and those who bring that disruption and corruption into His world. He's angry towards sinners. And Romans 1 verse 18 to 21 shows us why He is angry. He's angry because the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress this truth. What is this truth? This truth is the truth about God. which is that what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power, his divine nature, it's been clearly perceived since the creation of the world. Like we said, all human beings have a natural capacity to understand spiritual things, if you want to put it that way. We naturally understand that the world is more than just matter. All human beings naturally have an awareness of God. We may not know who exactly God is, but we know that there is a God. And by that itself, God says we are without excuse. You know, his creation, his invisible attributes have been made clearly perceived in the creation of the world. And so we are without excuse. And what do we do with this knowledge or awareness or consciousness of God? We do nothing. Verse 21. Although we know God, we don't honor him as God, we don't give thanks to him, but instead we became futile in our thinking and their foolish hearts were darkened. This right here in Romans 1 is a good explanation for what sin is like. We often think about sin as just morality. We think about sin in terms of how my actions affect another human being, right? That's why we feel that certain things that the Bible condemns should be justified. That's why we feel that, what's so wrong, let's say, about homosexuality, right? When homosexuals love each other, they're not harming each other, right? So how can that be sin? But that is a wrong understanding of what sin is. Sin is not ultimately just about whether or not you've harmed another human being. Sin is always about your relationship with God. Sin is always relational. In other words, sin is not just a problem with morality or whether you're a good person or not. Sin is not a problem of you, thinking that I can be a better human being. That's morality. What you see in Romans 1 is sin is a relationship issue that you have with God. Sin is I hate God and I don't want to be like him. I don't want to live for him. I don't want to image him. And so I would rather suppress this truth. I would rather believe that there is another God. I would rather believe that there is no God. I would rather believe anything just so long as I don't have to follow this God. This sin is a relational issue that you have with God. Sin is a identity issue, which is who am I? And who you are, right? This question of who I am always goes back to whether or not you want to submit and follow God's definition of who you are, which is that you are in his image, or whether or not you want to follow your own definition of who you are.